Bermuda, with its architecturally unique pastel homes, rich in history, lush gardens against a backdrop of pink sandy beaches and blue waters, all blended together to make this island a place of magic. Small wonder the Calypsonian deemed it another world. Inside Bermuda Homes, brought to you by Shell Point Orange, in association with Lily Bermuda and OBMI Bermuda. There's no doubt about it, Bermuda has so many beautiful houses and many stories to go with it. Take Gervin here on the Harbour Road in Paget. What a lovely house with so much history and memorabilia and a lovely story to tell. Gervin, built in the 1900s and taking its name from Gervin in Scotland, rests on a promontory with sweeping vistas of Hamilton Harbour. It has a guest house built in 1787, a boathouse, and a gatehouse. It was from this gatehouse that fashion maven, the late Polly Hornberg, actually started Calypso. Picture it, seamstresses working with bales of colorful cloths to create her designs. I guess you could have called it a cottage industry. The garden of roses, citrus, and bamboos are fragranced by patches of freesias dotting across the lawn. The two-story main house has 3 bedrooms and is full of antique Bermuda cedar furniture and an array of memorabilia depicting the life here in bygone days. Prominent in the entrance hall is a Bermuda cedar chest and a massive chair, both explained by Dr. Edward Harris, founding Executive Director Emeritus of the National Museum of Bermuda.
I'm sitting in Governor de Graaf's chair from St. Eustatius. He married a Godet, so his wife was from Bermuda. Now I will have you see that this chair is rather large for me, although I'm getting on a bit portly, but Governor de Graaf was a very large man, and so this chair is a bit extra wide for the gentleman. Now, de Graaf was very important because he was the first country to acknowledge the birth of the United States, and it was called the first salute, and he fired a cannon at an American ship, newly American ship, in the harbor, and was thus the first country to acknowledge the creation of the United States. An important figure to the Americans. Now, this chair is made out of mahogany, and mahogany does grow in Bermuda, but not in the prolific way that it grew in Cuba, which was the best mahogany, followed by Honduras, which had the next grade down. But what we had, of course, was the absolutely marvelous Bermuda cedar, a remarkable timber that had been in Bermuda long enough to speciate and become its own brand of juniper. Juniperus bermudiana, something like that in Latin. We used it for building houses, for all of the roof structures, door frames, window frames, that sort of thing, sometimes for the floors, but later on particularly for furniture, which is now highly valued. This is a Bermuda cedar chest, which you would use for storing clothes and materials, say in the winter, when you wanted to put them away for a while. But these were wonderfully made, and one of the remarkable things about them, which is a bit difficult to see on this one, but each of the makers had his own unique way of forming the rabbeting connecting the two pieces of timber on the corner. This is a wonderful piece. It has extra drawers. A lot of them didn't have drawers, but this has the drawers all in the cedar as well. And of course, as you know from visiting up north, people used cedar, that is to say juniper, to line closets because it keeps the bugs at bay, and this was a function of the Bermuda cedar chest, was that moths and things didn't like the aroma when you opened it up, coming out of a wonderful aroma of Bermuda cedar, and thus your clothes weren't eaten by the moths. One of the other things just to mention is, of course, we used the Bermuda cedar to build ships. And in the mid-18th century, Bermuda sloops were the fastest thing afloat because they were built out of cedar, which is lighter than oak, but it's also poisonous to the undersea termite, and so you didn't have to copper bottom them. They were also powered by the Bermuda rig, which we invented here in Bermuda in the middle or before 1674, and it's the most revolutionary change in sailing technology after the European square rigger. Looking down at the floor, cedar was sometimes used for floor planking, but it was really too valuable to use for that, and we instead used imported timbers from North America, and floors like this, or earlier floors like this, of what we called pitch pine, were made out of first growth or first cut pine in places like Maine, and it's a wonderful, durable wood, almost as good as cedar for longevity, and it also has built-in resin against termites, as does the cedar itself. So these types of timbers, combined with mahogany, which we also used, meant that we built up a marvelous repertoire of homegrown and homemade furniture in Bermudian tradition, based upon examples from Europe and America. But along with our houses, we have these wonderful examples of portable heritage, all made by Bermudians from all sectors of the community.
Come and discover the universe of Lily Bermuda at Stewart Hall in St. George's and on Front Street in Hamilton.
I'm in the sitting room of the charming two-story Gervin cottage. Now this tells a story. First, there's this focal point, the wood-burning fireplace. On the walls are lovely old paintings, including a map of Bermuda by John Dickinson Middleton Godet, who was a surveyor. The fabrics are by Molly Godet. She decorated this place because this is where she lived. Absolute charming. Now let's take a look upstairs if you want another story. The upstairs of this two-story bedroom cottage is just absolutely charming. Beautiful antique cedar beams in the ceiling. Gives you an idea of how old it is because it was built in the 1700s. And Molly Godet actually modernized it with some of her lovely fabrics and paintings. On the eastern porch, Dr. Harris is joined by Trevor Munnis, a former lawyer for the Godet Family Trust and a friend of the current occupants of Gervin, Eve Godet Thomas, and her husband, Nick, and their children. Dr. Edward Harris and Trevor Munnis talk about the history of the house.
Girvan is a wonderful house built in the mid-19th century, and you could say it's sort of one of the grand houses of Bermuda, of which we're fortunate to have a number. We were very lucky when we transitioned from building in timber to building in stone, because the houses are very well built and extremely durable. And so they've survived down the centuries, as it were, and Gervin is certainly an example of that. Well, of course, as well, you need to have families who are interested in preserving the buildings that, by and large, they've inherited and maintaining them in the style to which they've become accustomed, particularly with regard to roof, painting the roofs and keeping the damp and everything out. So this is one of the wonderful examples of Bermuda's unique vernacular architecture. One of the things about Bermuda architecture is you could say it's very sort of organic. And what I mean by that is that we were very fortunate that the volcano didn't come all the way through the surface of the water like Hawaii or something like that, or we'd have been living with very hard volcanic stones, which are very difficult to work. Fortunately, in the intervening ice ages and so on, a limestone cap formed on top of Bermuda through sand dunes consolidated through the action of rainwater. So Bermuda is basically a glorified sand hill, but it gave us this wonderful limestone. And of course, limestone has been the building stone of choice for over 5,000 years. Nearly all the great monuments around the world are built out of limestone. And limestone has also the wonderful characteristic that you can burn the stone. So for example, when you're quarrying and you get a lot of detritus and broken stone and so on, you can burn it to create lime. And lime is at once a paint, the paint of choice until modern paints in the 1940s, as whitewash. And then it also mixed with sand gives you your cementing ingredients. And that's why these houses are called organic, because it's all from the same sort of source and same material. And then coupled with the Bermuda cedar for all of your woodwork and your roofs, and of course things later on like furniture, we had everything that you needed to create this wonderful architecture, which has fortunately survived into modern times.
The way the Godets arrived in Bermuda was that they fled France as Huguenots. They were Protestant French who had to escape from France during the 18th century. And the way they escaped was the gentleman had to flee in a barrel down a river. He floated down the river in a barrel to escape being imprisoned and killed. And they escaped from Europe and ended up in Antigua. And from Antigua, part of the family moved to St. Eustatius, where one member of the family was married to the then governor of St. Eustatius, and you'll see one of those chairs when you tour the house. Later they ended up in Bermuda and owned a variety of businesses, and a lot of local people will know the store Godet and Young, which is still in St. George's, not owned by the Godets anymore, but still carries that name. With respect to the family, they were a prominent part of Bermuda. Lennox de Graaf Godet was an aviator who died very young. I think he was only 18 during the First World War. Tommy Godet, what we call Old Tommy Godet, who was Eve's grandfather, was too young to fight in the First World War and too old for the Second, so he joined the Merchant Navy and ended up being demobbed in Singapore. And I think there are probably some pewter mugs around which he got in Singapore during the Second World War. So it's quite a distinguished family, and they had large property interests. At one point in time they owned Hinson's Island, and it was called Godet's Island. Later they swapped that land for a strip of land which includes Gervin and Gervin Bank, which went through from Hamilton Harbor to the South Shore here in Paget.
Lennox de Graaf de Get was also the first Bermudian to sign up for the RAF. In those days it was called the Royal Flying Corps, but he was actually the first Bermudian to do so, and he also did it as he was at the time a Rhodes Scholar, so he was still at university as a Rhodes Scholar from Bermuda when he signed up. He had a very successful tour through the war, which unfortunately ended tragically when he was shot down over Germany in June of 1918.
These two charming old pocket doors separate the kitchen from the dining room. And of course, in the dining room is replete with color, fabrics by Molly Godet, and the laminated table which Eve brought back from London, and of course, the beautiful grandfather clock standing in the corner. It just gives us a warm, warm feeling. This wall holds an array of art by Eve and Molly Cadet, but central to it is this letter from King George from a grateful nation in the death of Leonard de Graaf Cadet in the First World War. This spacious living room contains a variety of paintings by Molly Godet, framed photographs, furniture, and this massive coat of arms over the mantelpiece. Now, Eve, this is a lovely room. Tell me what I'm looking at.
So this is the sitting room in the house. I think the room behind us would have been the dining room at one point, but we just use it as a study at the moment. This room is, well, really a mix of how my mother left it and what we brought with us when we moved out to Bermuda, which was about 9 months ago now. So behind me you can see these 4 paintings, which are some of my favourites. These are 4 nudes that my mother Molly did when she was at art college in London in the 60s. So she left Bermuda in about 68, I think, to go to Hornsey Art College, and then didn't come back until she retired. And after she painted these, she actually stopped painting, and she worked as an art director for an advertising agency for 30 odd years, and didn't actually pick up painting again until she moved back to Bermuda when she retired. So after she passed away, when my brother and I were sorting things out in London, we felt that we really ought to bring these back to the house, to come back here, but to be with all of her other paintings, you know. And they're very different to them. She always used to say, whether or not this is true, I don't know, that she painted them partly in coffee because she couldn't afford the paint, but I don't know if that's true or not, but I think they're quite special, but they're very different to the landscapes that she's more known for here, really.
Your mother, Molly, seemed to love colour. I mean, it's all over the place.
Yes, absolutely. She reupholstered all these cushions in African fabrics. She and my father went on safari in Kenya when I was a baby, I think, and she fell in love with it, and she collected African fabrics. You probably noticed also the governor's chair that Ed was sitting on. She reupholstered it. Wouldn't obviously have looked like that originally. So yeah, it's just lovely and bright and colourful, and kind of fits with Bermuda, I think, as well.
Now, Eve, I'm absolutely fascinated by this table. Is it Indian?
I think it is Indian originally. This is my table, which we brought with us when we shipped our things. I got it in a warehouse sale. They called it a bone inlay. Whether or not it's real bone, I don't know. I hope not, but I think it would have been Indian originally, or potentially Moroccan maybe. I'm not sure.
Now, how did the coat of arms get above your mantle? What's the significance of that?
Well, the thing with my mother is she used to collect a lot of things from house sales and all over the place, so who knows where it came from. I think it would originally have come from one of the army bases, one of the army barracks. It's a plaster coat of arms. And yeah, she had it in the sitting room when we left it, so we haven't moved that. I don't think we could if we wanted to. So we're standing in the stairwell. It's a real mixture of paintings. My mother painted with the plein air group, so she collected a lot of their work, and I think they probably swapped a lot of paintings as well. I particularly love this picture here, which is a painting she did of Seven Wells, where she grew up, the property on the North Shore, and it was one of the first paintings she did when she started painting again. She gave it to me for Christmas a long time ago. So the pictures on this wall are really a mix of pictures she already had hanging here and pictures that we brought out. When we came out to Bermuda, Mum had hung the pictures going up to the top of the banister, and we had lots of other pictures of our own and other pictures that she'd had around the house that I figured we could just keep going up. So we've almost doubled the height now. It's the full height of the stair. They're mostly all pictures of Bermuda. You have a picture of Gervin here by Elisa Drone. Her pictures, some of our pictures. This is the one she won, a print of the picture she won the Shaman for. And yeah, some of our own pictures as well, including Nick's parents' house further up. But yeah, kind of thought we'd keep them all together.
We end our delightful tour of Girvan with a stunning view of Hamilton Harbor from this upstairs western porch of the house. Not too shabby, huh? Well, for Inside Bermuda Homes here at Girvan, I'm Charles Webbe.